remakes are beating new games, and it's not nostalgia. If it's not nostalgia, what is it? IP recognition, the fact that the remake of an old game is like the old game was actually a good game.
Remakes and remasters seem to be dominating these days, and here's what's kind of cool. There's a new survey, and it shows something real striking. That 90% of you have played a remaster or a remake within the last few years.
90%?
Which isn't really a surprise. I mean, I've certainly played a few. I imagine you have.
Surprised
and who
me.
could blame you? These games are dominating. And the biggest example is probably Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered, because that has outsold all but one of the new games released this year.
Really? I did not realize it sold that well. It did better than Call of Duty Black Ops, EA Sport. Man, the sports games always sold. I actually did not know it sold that well.
See, I wonder then, is this just the industry's future? An endless cycle of nostalgic re-releases forever, all consuming itself? Well, it turns out maybe not. Because for most people playing these remakes, it's actually not about nostalgia. It's literally impossible because most of them haven't played the original version. And that's just one snippet of the new data we've got about remakes. When I say every week brings a new remake or remaster, that's not idle words, it's quite literal. Last week had Trials in the Sky First Chapter and Platypus Reclayed. This week there's Pac-Man World 2 Repack. Perhaps not Oblivion Remastered here, and you'd be forgiven for being confused at how it appears there's some cultural zeitgeist crying out for early 2000s games that have already been re-released or ported half a dozen times. It's a bit weird.
Nah, it's not weird, dude. Old games were great, bro. Everyone wants to replay. Well, I mean, I got to see the argument to not being nostalgic. Because I was about to say, everyone wants to replay the game they played in their childhood, which is literal nostalgia. I mean, I buy games from nostalgia too, for sure. So what's the argument?
But in 2025,
what's the argument?
Culture has really just reached new heights here. Like, to put some stats in the Elder Scrolls Oblivion situation, that remaster sold more copies in its first month than the original game did in 15 months. And in total, it has already completely outsold the original release of the game, which is kind of wild. Now, you could argue that something sad is happening here. That publishers are just pushing lazy nostalgia grabs because they can't make new games that are good, and that nobody's money is going to new games. And then maybe this all shows us that people crave the good games of the past that we used to play, not the bad games that we get now. But that wouldn't make full sense because of a kind of staggering statistic from this recent survey, that 85% of you have played a remake or a remaster of a game that you did not play in the first place.
True, but word of mouth exists in social media. Also, there's like always hype around games these days. So it's like nostalgia might not be for everyone, but there might be this spark that like ignites like the hype of a game that starts going. I mean, like Megabonk's an example of a game that can start like gaining some hype and people talk about it and it spreads word of mouth and then everyone starts playing it. Like that's just happened with Megabonk. So that same process can happen starting with people who are nostalgia, like, you know, nostalgia baited basically into trying the game. They're like, okay, why don't we try it? And it ends up being good. And then that drives the word of mouth. It's kind of like a little bit of a spark to, you know, ignite it a little bit more than just like a normal game.
So it actually seems that this stuff is expanding into a new audience. Let's dive into the survey, and to do that, we gotta define our terms. Remakes are complete reimaginings built from scratch, so updated graphics, gameplay mechanics, and sometimes story elements. Remasters are enhanced versions of originals. That means improved visuals, sound, and performance, but the core gameplay staying the same. And here's what the data tells us. MTM Consulting surveyed 1,500 US and UK gamers, and GameIndustry.biz brought the data to our attention, and for the sake of uniformity, they gave respondents those specific definitions so everyone's on the same terms. Then they asked people how they feel. And the findings, so there's the 90% stat of people having played at least one remaster or remake.
Which is a crazy number.
Considering how many there have been, that's not a surprise. Then there's the 85% stat that I just talked about. But there's some other ones too. 80% and 71% of people respectively believe that these games are comforting and nostalgic at the same time as being a good way to share beloved games with new generations.
Yeah.
So through these numbers, we actually see that the majority of people are picking up these games for the first time. And we'll come back to that. But where it's getting tricky for publishers is what the hell to do. And we've got big examples of that. Some of them are, say, older Assassin's Creed remake examples. There's the whole Space Marine 1 thing. And there's a core tension. If you change the game too much, some people won't like it. If you don't change it enough, other people also won't like it, because maybe what they're expecting is a Resi 4 remake tier of work. But you know what?
I mean, that's true. That kind of, So in a way that's sort of happening with RuneScape now, like selling is coming out, and there are people, I think maybe myself included, that aren't looking forward to like new skills being added in the game because you play it because it's the old version of the game you used to love. But then there's people that are like don't like love the game back in the day, but want to see it continue to evolve. So like, yeah, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
It's nice. We don't need to take this shit in vibes because now we've actually got some data. Well, let me know if this gels with your experience. So 35% of players say remakes are better when they change narrative or gameplay elements. 30% say they're worse. 35% say they're fine either way. So, yeah, if you're a developer, what do you do? It's
totally
a third,
split.
a third, a third. Because regardless, it seems some people are going to be unhappy. And this might explain the continual discourse around these games. We haven't settled on a correct approach, but we have now learned some things. So what affects player experience the most? Well, making games look and feel modern, and as the survey people put it, gamers expect major graphical overhauls, updated controls, and improvements to mechanics. Now, this is where we can get into some solid examples. Take Capcom's Resident Evil remakes. At least one of the interviewees specifically cited tank controls, basically just saying gamers of a younger age would probably struggle with them. And yeah, can you imagine the Zoomers and the Gen Alphas trying to do tank controls like original Resi? That would be mad. Though obviously, if you change too much, it will feel wrong to fans of the original. Like in a way, there has to be a little bit of authenticity promoting clunk in the controls of Leon, because if he controlled like an uber badass, he wouldn't exactly play like one, because it's your mastery of his controls that actually nails the character's development and capability throughout the series. But as we press on through the survey, well, we get to talk about pricing. And certainly, there's opinions in pricing. 74% of users expect a game to be cheaper than the original release to a greater or lesser degree. And that's both about the value of the upgraded product and the decision to publish it at all. 6%, though, go further. They say they want them free or within subscription services. And also timing matters. Only 4% of people think 2 years is enough time between releases, 14% say 3 to 4, 32% say 5 to 6 as the appropriate amount of time, and certainly, hey, looking at you PlayStation, you guys really do like...
I mean, re-releasing the game 2 years after it's out would seem absolutely crazy to me, to be honest.
Doing it pretty quick. But if you want a perfect example of everything going wrong, it comes from a really goddamn sad place, and that is the Space Marine Mastercrafted Edition from Sega earlier this year. Oh dear, it did not do well. Existing players felt cheated, there was no discounted upgrade path. The Anniversary Edition had effectively been re-released back in 2021, and the Mastercrafted Edition really didn't add enough graphical improvements whatsoever. It felt like a cheap cash grab to capitalize on Space Marine 2 being pretty goddamn good. So here's the lesson. Especially once a game is accessible in a modern digital format to audiences, you can't just keep hitting the re-release button. But companies will obviously keep trying, and that's because the opportunities far, far outweigh the costs. We've got to talk about the business case. Think about the business...
The company will always do what is the bottom line best thing. If they make more money re-releasing the same game over and over, I feel like sometimes you can get away with it. Like, The Elder Scrolls Skyrim was kind of a meme because they kept re-releasing on a million different platforms and like a million different versions. And it did. I'm surprised people didn't get more annoyed by that. Where it was, you'd have Game of the Year edition, you would have the versions for every single different platform. You know, you literally can play Skyrim on Alexa, which is pretty fun. If you have an Alexa at home, do like, hey Alexa, let's play Skyrim. It's actually kind of fun. It's just like a free little app thing. I think you have to download like an app or something in order to do it, but like it's pretty good.
Aside like this, Oblivion is a goddamn dream scenario. It massively outsold the original, in great part because there are simply more gamers now. And one thing you'll see in, like, say, rookie startups is people being like, oh, you know, if I just get 10% of the market, then I'll make X amount of money. And that's a little bit silly, but yeah, it can kind of fit our purposes for here.
If I only get 20% of every view on YouTube, then all my videos are going to get 50 billion views.
Even if you assume that a game sold to 1% of the audience way back in the day, and it could still sell to 1% of the current audience again in 2025, then it would be worth the cost of updating because, good God, the audience for games has increased massively. And this survey effectively validates that logic. The idea that 85% of players are willing to buy remakes with no personal attachment is huge. Now, maybe they have nostalgia for an era. There'll be creator coverage, maybe from people who played it back in the day, so these remasters will kind of have Vanguard-ish super fans.
I think they just heard the game is good. Like, if there's a a game that's been crazy good for a long time. They've probably had word of mouth, continually heard about the game for however many years, was like, oh man, I never played that back in the day. And now they get to be a part of the hype when it relaunches and they can feel like part of it. You know what I mean?
And it helps with branding. Popular games guarantee at least some audiences. And taking a look at my personal playing habits, I've got to say I do have a bit of a theory here in why these games can work so goddamn well. So, across this channel, across the years, we've talked about so many game development stories that have been utter goddamn shit shows. I think a great example of one which, I mean, that it even came out is kind of shocking. It would be Dragon Age Veilguard. So the deal with Dragon Age, right? That went through like multiple redevelopments, and I believe they did a reboot and then made the version we got in like 18 months. And that is a story that is just repeated across so many games. Now, a lot of that is because of planning risk, right? There's the game that they plan, and then they just keep on needing to goddamn reboot and reboot and reboot, and it ends up being complete chaos. But you see with these remasters, you already have a proven formula, and that proven formula means you have far less design risk. One of the things that we talk about in like project planning is the difference between a known unknown and an unknown unknown, right? So an unknown unknown is something you just truly cannot predict, and any purely new project is going to be stuffed full of them. Whereas if you're doing a remaster of a game that you've already got like the whole template for, man, that's going to be way, way, way easier, because you can point to everyone across your production team to the literal thing that they're remaking. And that is actually huge, because one of the things we're pretty good at in this industry is, well, scaling up big production teams. One of the things we're less good at is
this Game Dev Tycoon? Like I played Game Dev Tycoon, which is actually super fun. Is that what this is? I've not seen this graphical version of if is this a new Game Dev Tycoon? That's what this looks like.
All of those production teams. Some of that can be bad management, as seen in so many stories. Some of that can just be that games are extremely complex insofar as software development goes. They have so much design risk that with teams as large as game teams have ended up being, it's hard to just utilize everyone well. And that's where I think the remakes and the remasters actually can do something really important. They can take away risk, and that opens the door for pretty amazing levels of polish. The best examples, of course, Resi 4 and probably Oblivion. I'm sure you can name a few as well. But here's the weird thing. It's not just successful games getting remastered. Any game that exists within an IP library can get a second chance. If a game was niche before, well, actually that niche could be far larger in 2025. And that's why we've been seeing companies hoovering up legacy IP. Seriously.
True.
Embracer does it, Atari does it, Microids, I think I'll go with Microids, they do it as well. If you can sell die-hard fans of the old stuff, you can also sell to new genre fans. And it seems that's been driving a lot of IP hoovering up over the last few years. Ultimately then, it's a perfect storm. You get either lower development costs or perhaps more efficient deployment of your capital because, well, you know, you're remaking a thing. You already know what the thing looks like. Even better for the rights holders, there's the potential of outsourcing for upscaling and improvements with the likes of, say, Asper. That sort of thing's always been the case, but with this new data that we've got, we can see that the audiences, we are just as responsible for all of this stuff happening because we actually do turn up for these games and we buy them. And you know what? Whenever I think about my recent play habits, yeah, there's actually a lot of this in them because it's been Oblivion remastered. Recently, Last of Us Part 1 remastered.
I feel like I don't really mind buying remasters if they're good. Like Oblivion remaster, I don't feel like, you know, I don't feel any ill will at all about that. The game was like awesome, was it not? And it seems
you know
fine.
Why? Girlfriend hadn't played it. We wanted to play through it together. The upgraded version, as it turns out, while yeah, the multiplayer ain't there, god damn, it is gorgeous. And the gameplay updates have it playing slick as hell. It's been a brilliant experience. And it proves the core of The Last of Us is as timelessly good as it always was. If you give it a big new lick of paint, it'll just be the best version to play now. In the best case, it can be like when you get a new scan, a new remastering of a classic movie that's absolutely beloved, that allows people to fully enjoy it and fully appreciate it on newer hardware. And I think that's honestly great for games. There's loads of games that I think shouldn't be relegated to the past. But there is another side to this. Making new games is more expensive than ever. And as an example of that, Shuhei Yoshida, who you may know for being fairly legendary within PlayStation for a long ass time, he was saying recently, and he's not with PlayStation anymore, but that the single-player games now cost so much money to make that they actually need the additional income from remasters and PC ports to actually make shit viable. Now, theoretically, there is an upper limit here. You can't constantly remake old stuff because of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, isn't this a losing proposition if you constantly have to make more and more and more money? And that just seems like that's not going to work.
You'll run out of it.
Yeah.
And if there's any form of reckoning our industry is going to face, it's probably that senior staff have often been treated quite badly. There's been a lot of burnout. There's been a lot of people leaving the games industry. And in an ideal world, they are the people who make the new games using all of their experience. And in my estimation, when you combine that with a lot of industry trend chasing, that's probably a large part of why a lot of new games just don't feel like they hit as good as games used to. Games that when they're remastered, it sure does seem we all lap up and buy. Okay, what I want you to do is let me know what is your best and worst recent experience with a remake or remaster. And once you're done with that, well, there's a company we need to talk about. It's called Bungie, because, goddamn, I think they need a remake or remaster at this stage. But seriously, the situation's kind of dire, and you can learn all about that in this video next.
I kind of like remakes, man. Because the thing about the remake is if I don't like a certain game, or I hear the remake quality is not good, I'm just not going to buy it. And when they hit a game, eventually I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind replaying this with updated graphics, etc. I can just choose to play it. You can just vote with your wallet. I don't mind remake existing, to be honest. It doesn't bother me like near as much as some other monetization practices like the NCSoft we were hearing about, where it's a $30 subscription plus a $20 subscription plus pay to win plus vertical progression to the pay to win. Some of those games I wouldn't mind replaying again. Remakes, remasters, I'm okay with both. It really comes down to the quality of it. Like if it's the same game, just remastered with better quality, that's fine. I mean, I see people play Warcraft 3 all the time, and that remaster, remake, whatever you want to call it, was not well received on launch. But that was mostly, I believe, due to the nature of what they were doing with the mod situation. Like it kind of lost them a lot of the goodwill there. But people are playing the remaster as opposed to like the OG Warcraft 3. At least I'm just talking from experience with like my friends like Pox, etc. They all play the remaster. Like some of those, I don't know. I'm not really like salty at the existence of remaster or remakes. I just vote with the wall. You want to play? You like the game? You're willing to support? Because there are some games where it's like I like that game so much I would be willing to buy it a second time, if it's all right. You can choose one game to remake. What would it be? Well, there's some games that I feel like are so timeless and so perfect that even though I'd be interested to see a new twist on it, they don't necessarily need a remake. Like Super Metroid is one example. Like the game's perfect, doesn't need a remake or a remaster at all. But I'd be just curious to see what would happen if they did one. You know what I mean? But then again, it could get ruined with the movement, etc. Maybe like a remake of like Super Smash Bros. Melee with all of the same mechanics and like physics engine, with no removos, etc. But maybe a little bit of an update in the graphics, etc. Like there's some games like that I feel like are peak and really well done that I wouldn't mind seeing a remaster too if they don't mess with what really made them good to begin with. That's why I'm saying I kind of don't mind some remasters. And there's definitely some milking of the audience, that goes on with that. If you're just pumping out dog shit remaster after remaster after remaster, yeah, like, absolutely, like, there becomes an issue with there. But I'm a lot chiller about remakes and remasters. I feel like I don't really like fundamentally when I see them, I don't immediately think, they're just trying to screw me. Sometimes they are, but most of the time it's no big deal to me. Smash to the top versus bottom, archers versus archers. Super Metroid's in your top 5 all-time favorite game. No, Super Metroid is in top 5 easily. Super Metroid is like one of the reasons, I still play games. One of the most underrated games was Destroy All Humans. Destroy All Humans was made like as a joke. He was in my understanding of it, I don't know if this is a true story, but from what I remember, the guy who made the game or pitched the game was trying to like basically say that the industry had gone sloppy, where it's just a bunch of like destroy shit, and you can basically pump out anything. So they made destroy all human, like that was, oh, just make it destroy all humans, you know. And then they're like, oh, that's a great idea, and like it ended up actually becoming like it actually became a game.